This is a video about carbohydrate digestion, just carbohydrates. So if you eat a meal that's just made of carbohydrates, the meal is going to go in through the mouth. You're going to start to chew. And as you chew, you're going to start to form a bolus. What's going to come down after you chew and you chew and you chew, what's going to be swallowed down here is going to be called a ball of food. And the name for that is bolus. When you swallow, the epiglottis is going to cover up the trachea, and the trachea is the tube that leads to your lungs. We'll talk about that more in Unit 2. The bolus is going to go down your esophagus, and it's going to go down through the process of peristalsis. We can see here somebody swallowing, the squeezing that goes on there. That's called peristalsis. So another word for chewing was mastication, but for carbohydrates, and only for carbohydrates, chemical digestion begins in the mouth. Your saliva has a few purposes. It's there to lubricate your food, help you swallow, but also it has salivary amylase to start the digestion of carbohydrates, to break complex carbohydrates down into smaller pieces. So polysaccharides down into smaller polysaccharides. As you swallow down your esophagus, you're going to go past a border. That border is called the esophageal sphincter. That separates your esophagus from your stomach, mostly prevents your stomach from squeezing that food back up as it does churning. In the stomach, there will be churning, and there will also be peristalsis just to empty it out. So churning is the squishing and the squeezing that happens inside the stomach. Your salivary amylase will continue to function down your esophagus, but once it gets into your stomach and your stomach starts to digest, your stomach starts to secrete gastric juice, which contains hydrochloric acid and pepsin, the enzyme salivary amylase will start to be digested and it'll stop working. So that's what this line is about here. After the stomach has done its job, the bolus will leave. Well, at this point it's chyme. Once the stomach is done squishing it around, it's called chyme. It'll leave through the pyloric sphincter. The pylorus is this region of the stomach, and the sphincter at the end, the muscles that close it off, is called the pyloric sphincter. The pyloric sphincter opens up and the chyme goes into the small intestine. When it goes into there, it will have some, so the small intestine is made of the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. It will have some peristalsis as it gets squeezed through the first section, the duodenum. The duodenum does a little kind of U shape, kind of like the trap under a sink or a toilet, for kind of the same purpose. The jejunum is the first twisty bit, and the ileum is the next bit after that. And remember, the jejunum and the ileum have lots of villi. Those little tiny folds with microvilli on top of them, where you will be absorbing the nutrients once you're done digesting. So in the small intestine, you'll have peristalsis as the food moves, or chyme at this point moves through, and segmentation, which is the kind of peristalsis where it doesn't go in a straight line, but rather it gets squeezed back and forth to mix. And what you're trying to mix here are the digestive enzymes that were created by your pancreas. Your pancreas makes a lot of stuff, including pancreatic amylase, to replace the salivary amylase that's no longer used, and various carbohydrates that we thankfully don't have to memorize in this course. Once you're done there, that's the end of the digestive process, really. In the large intestine, there is some peristalsis, but it's not happening to carbohydrates anymore because you'll already have absorbed those. In the large intestine, the main idea is to reabsorb some vitamins, minerals, and mostly water. So we have polysaccharides, which are complex carbohydrates, broken down into smaller and smaller until we get disaccharides, and then eventually single sugar units, either a glucose, a fructose, or galactose, which are called monosaccharides. So by the time we're done, our polysaccharide, our carbohydrate, has been turned into a monosaccharide, and that's what gets absorbed. So the absorption of those monosaccharides happens in your small intestine, in especially the jejunum and the ileum. Those are the areas of the small intestine that have the greatest number of these villi. And the villi are little bends and folds. So your intestines are twisty. That increases their surface area. They also have little lumps in them, but those lumps have little lumps, tiny little ones called villi, and on top of those there are even smaller, these are smaller than a single cell, that's one cell. The bumps that are on a single cell are called microvilli. Lots of ways to increase surface area. Your villi actually look like this. This is an image of your villi. Well, not yours, somebody else's. And the monosaccharides are going to be absorbed through the villi by active transport. Remember, active transport requires ATP, requires energy to do. It's pumped across. It will selectively choose things like glucose, pump it across the cell membrane into here, where it will go from any concentration into here. That's the beauty of active transport. It's not always high concentration to low. And once it's in here, it will go into your capillaries. The blue and the red in here are capillaries, and they're part of your circulatory system. The green we'll talk about when we talk about lipids, but that's part of your lymphatic system. So your monosaccharides, the products of digestion, are absorbed through the villi by active transport into your capillaries. So that's part of your blood, your circulatory system. And for carbohydrates, it's important to remember one extra thing. The blood going back towards the heart always travels through veins. And this particular vein is called the hepatic portal vein. Hepatic, anything starting with hep, has to do with the liver. And the hepatic portal vein leads to the liver. And in the liver, a very important job is done. Glucose is packaged up into glycogen. Glycogen is what we use to store that glucose in the short term so that we don't have spikes in blood sugar every time we eat, but rather we can have stored glycogen, and if we need glucose, we can always break off a little piece to use it. Okay, so this one was about carbohydrate digestion, and there will be 3 more videos about the other 3 types of macromolecule.